And welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And I got Ariel with me today. We're just gonna have a fun little live, you know what I mean? And do some comparative mythology stuff, just some freestyle in it. Nothing too. We're not getting like no one's getting tested here. It's not like an academic setting here. No, we're just having fun. We're just going through and throwing some theories around. I love to hear your guys' thoughts on this stuff. Lately, I've been reading through this Stories from Ancient Canaan by Michael Coogan. And it's really got me thinking about these ancient pantheons. And a lot of people don't realize that in the Semitic world, in Canaan, before Israel, before the Bible, before Moses or David and all those characters, there was just pure polytheistic religion happening in that part of the world. And so I want to get into that because a lot of scholars have been noticing a lot of different scholars on through different approaches to this have pointed out that a lot of the polytheistic roots find their way into the text. They trickle in somehow. Like you can find little remnants in there, whether it be a title of Yahweh or just some story that we know from ancient Sumer that gets its way in there. And I wanted to start off by talking about how when I did that video with when I did that video on Sanko Nyathan and Philo of Biblos's text, when I read out the text and did some editing with it, I couldn't believe how much a lot of their theology lines up with Greek mythology. Saturn, like Saturn even being called or I'm sorry, El being called Kronos in the text. And even as far as going saying he was deified as the star Saturn. And sure enough, I mean, even that's not even in that text, but just alone today, Saturn's day, we still call it Saturn. We still call it Saturday, and that's a day that was to given to Saturn or Kronos, and that's also the Sabbath, which is El's day. You know, so that's still a thing right now, and I think that's interesting. And I wanted to address something to say, Ariel.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, I was listening to some stuff beforehand, and it was really interesting how it described the Sabbath or Saturday, like how it was used in ancient times. I mean, it's similar, but it's not the same way that's understood today. But the way that it was described is basically that it was about recalling this like golden age of Saturn, or in this case of El, and the role that I mean, the kind of this idea that like society has become more chaotic, and then you can. I mean, personally, I have some issues with that idea because you also have. I mean, there's definitely an increase in certain things, but the idea that there's anything new, like as in Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun. But there is something really fascinating about shoot. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Um, what was that I was just saying? Sorry, it's the COVID brain.
You're talking about Sat or L, and
Oh, right.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, about this golden age, how it's like for one day of the week, you're able to kind of create this sacred space, separating. I mean, literally, part of the Shabbat ritual, like when you end Shabbat, you do Havdalah, which means separation. It's from the root lehavdil, to separate. And so it basically lehavdil ben chodesh, or no, ben kodesh uvecho, to separate the holy from the mundane, or the like the
yeah,
everyday.
yeah.
And so basically it's kind of like you're almost creating like, and I don't mean this literally, but you're almost creating this like symbolic time machine that takes you back to the time before people had to work, before people had to toil. And so it's like maybe nowadays it's viewed, and I think this is part of the problem with looking at anything, especially something like a religion that originated so far back in the past, to look at it within only a modern context. Because you look at it, it's like, well, I feel this is a burden to not be able to do these things on Shabbat. But if you look at it as it's returning to a time before, not just before certain things, but literally before work was necessary. There's this like it's a difference in idea, not that you're not allowed to work, but that you don't have to work.
It's interesting. Never thought about it that way. Now, before I see a couple super chats already, I want to get to in a second, real quick today. No, we're not going to do nothing. Not like I have someone like presenting anything, so I'll get to those very soon. But I just want to read some stuff from this that I think is going to be interesting for you guys. So, Michael Coogan in his introduction talks about the here's it. The head of the pantheon is El. His epithets, the king, the father of the gods, indicate. In the list of deities and the offsprings made to them, El generally precedes the other major gods. Although he himself can be preceded by the older gods, the generation of predecessors he presumably had supplanted before Ugaritic zenith is the latter part of the second millennium BCE. El's name is a common noun meaning God. Its precise etymology is uncertain. Two major theories derive it from roots meaning strong or first. In his role as head of the pantheon, El is well attested throughout the Semitic world. Compare, for example, the Arabic cognate Allah, which literally means the God, or simply God. The epithets the merciful and the kind used of Allah are strikingly close, which you're about to see in a little bit, to the Ugaritic designations of El as the kind and the compassionate. The home of El, the creator of creatures, is a mountain from whose base flow the two rivers that are the source of all fresh water in the world. By the way, the two waters thing, you see that with the Sumerian creation myth. There he lives in a tent, and there the sons of El, the divine assembly, over which he presides, meet. In Ugaritic art, El is depicted as a bearded patriarchal figure, as in the stela shown on the cover of this book, which is this right here.
So,
I just want to finish this off real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'll cover it on this book. Although his behavior at a drinking feast, I'm going to read this to you, by the way, as described in the tablet translated here, El's drinking party is hardly dignified. Go ahead.
Oh, can you just go back to the slide so I can see?
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right. So, and also the one before B is
this one.
The first one and then the second one. Okay, yeah. So
somehow they got switched over. I don't know what happened, but yeah.
All right. So where he talks about being king and father.
Oh, okay. This one.
Yeah. So there's some really interesting stuff here. So I mean, like I see so many connections to like my own tradition, or like I want to specify like Judaism. Although like I'm not Orthodox, I'm pretty well versed in it. But so the head of the pantheon was El, and so in the case of the Jewish God, it's Elo. Well, some people have an issue with saying Elohim. Some people say Elohim, like so as not to take the name in vain. But really, it's about not swearing on the name in vain. But so as his epithets, the king and the father of gods. So there's this one, like I guess you could call it an epithet, Avinu Malkeinu, our father, our king. And so in this, the title of like the king of the gods or the father of the gods gets kind of transposed as to being like, it's not saying that the Israelites are gods because they're like the sons of El. It's because the sons of El are understood as being like, the essentially the founders or the gods of all these different kingdoms around them. And it happens to be that El was, and this is an interesting thing because you look, El is shared pretty much throughout the ancient Near East. Almost everyone worshipped El, and so because of this, it's important that everyone wants to say that their god is becoming El or their god is like replacing El. But at the end of the day, in ancient Israel, it would have been like the Yud He Vav He, and which we're not 100% sure how it was pronounced. But the other thing, so the second slide.
This one.
No. This one. Wait, is this the one that? Yeah. Okay. So so stronger first. So interestingly enough, those are those are possible etymologies. So the word El is the first two letters in the word Aleph, which means ox, which is actually where the shape of the Aleph is derived from. And so it's this concept of like strong, unbridled power. And I was actually working on some art recently, and I found this one psalm. It basically was like something like that. In the absence of bulls, the trough is clean, but abundant harvests come through the force of the ox. And so it's basically saying that you can't get stuff done without this power. And given this is like a different context than like the heavenly power
that's where the aleph comes from. Even the Latin / English, by through Latin alphabet, has that similar aleph. It comes from the same symbol basically.
Yep.
Because it's sideways A. You know what I mean? Which is kind of crazy. Like all the linguistics is the key to figuring out like where everything comes from. It's pretty crazy. I need to get me a real expert in linguistics to come on here and like really break down these names and etymologies and like really go into it, which would be fascinating.
Ooh, I was just going to say, if you wanted, I could talk to to one of my professors who she's the one who taught me biblical Hebrew, and given she's much more proficient than I am, I have a lot of memory issues. And even before I had COVID, like some of the stuff wasn't so easy for me to remember, but she's really good. But yeah, so the other things I saw, it's the other one.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe just leave it up because I have a few thoughts. So let's see. So the other thing. So when it comes to Allah, interestingly enough, how it says the God, it's literally al-ilah. So the word in Arabic is still ilah. It's not just Allah, which makes me think there might be something to the because we know that the word Elohim is either a plural or it's used to refer to like the majesty of plurality, or like kind of like the abundance of power or something. But I tend to think that it might be actually what's the word, like a compound where it's El Ha-Elim, and then it just drops the relevant parts to become El Hayim or Elohim, because it's Aleph Lamed Vav Hey Yud Mem. And it might be hard for people who don't speak Hebrew to understand, but basically it could be God of gods in the same way that Al-Ilah is the God, because it would make sense to have the term the God of gods in a Hebrew context, because you don't have this idea that there's only one God until after the first exile. And in Islam, you do have this idea that there is only one God. And then the other thing, so the title is like kind and compassionate, Rachum v'chanun. So like during Yom Kippur, there's this one thing that Jews sing. It's like I forget exactly how it starts, but El Rachum v'chanun. I forget the whole thing, but basically the merciful and the compassionate. And then how it talks about, let's see, what else is there? I think, the other thing is the beardedness. Oh, no, the divine assembly. That's something that's oh, no, sorry.
Let me continue with this because we're going to get to that in a second. I'll show you what I mean. Because when we get to this one, the next one I was going to read was how Baal replaces El in this pantheon, becomes the king. Now I wanted to hold off on that for 1 second because this is important, and you'll see what I mean in a second. You'll understand what I mean by this. So, and this is what the next paragraph that I was going to read was. I'm just going to read it actually. The issues connected with El is to assess his importance in Ugaritic religion. By the time Baal's cycle was composed, Baal was the king of the pantheon, expressed in his boast, "I alone rule over the gods." This claim is echoed by the goddess Anat and Asherah. Nevertheless, in the surviving Canaanite stories, El is by no means an important ruler. It is he and no other god who can cure Kurta. It is he and no other gods who can cure Kurta. It is he whom Baal turns for help for Denel, and whose permission Anat requests to take her revenge on Akat. And significantly, it is he who sides against death in Baal's favor. The best explanation of these discrepancies in the Canaanite theology was not static. While El was the head of the pantheon and actively so in earlier stories such as Akkad and Kurta, Baal was becoming the dominant Canaanite deity, and the Baal cycle is perhaps reflects this process. This is the whole point of like me doing this, was that seeing this succession of kings, king of the gods, Baal taking over for El. We see this in Greek mythology as well. We see this in Hindu mythology too. We see Saturn is the king of the gods. Well, he succeeded Uranus, and then after Saturn, you get Jupiter or Zeus, depending if it's Greek or Latin. So Baal is like, it makes me wonder: are they basing this off the whole Baal thing, or are both of these traditions coming from something else? Are they both common to something older, maybe? Because the idea of there being a sky father who rules, and then all of a sudden he's not ruling anymore, someone else is ruling, and then usually it's like his son or something. That's common throughout all these traditions. That's basically what you were kind of getting at, right?
Um, partially. In regards to what I said in like what did I say that?
You were getting at El being the king of the gods.
Oh yeah. I mean that that was one of the things I said. But the other things, just before I lose the thought, if you could just throw up the first or the second slide. Sorry. Let's see. Is it? Yeah, here. So the thing about living in a tent, there's like a mirror with that in how when Abraham meets God or like meets the three angels, um, that story, like I mean, Abraham, he welcomes people into his tent. That's how God knows that he's like the right person to bless with, being his offspring as numerous as the stars. The other thing is the El being depicted as a bearded patriarch. If I don't know if you've noticed this, it's something that's really interesting. But Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Okay, well, uh, mainly you definitely see this with Eastern Orthodox Christianity, but or like the emphasis on the beard, that there's like it's not just like a faction choice. It's I know at least within Jewish tradition there's this like, I don't really know exactly where the tradition comes from, but there's this idea that like that each strand of hair, like each strand of the beard represents like a ray of light, kind of like is similar to like the revelation on Sinai where or on the mountains where it talks about like the rays shining forth. Though I mean, I tend to think that's an explanation of why people have beards, but ultimately it goes back to this idea that the male gods, that they have beards, and the bigger their beard, the longer their beard, the stronger they are.
Sure. Let me what I'm going to do now is I want to get to this text. I have there's an Ugaritic tablet. It looks like this. And it's called The Lovely Gods. The Lovely Gods. I had the translation. I'm going to go through it and show it to you. Before we do that though, let me just catch up on some of these super chats. They've been sitting up here for a while. Michelle Lamato. Thank you for the super chat. Who is Baal connected to in Greek myth? We were just kind of talking about this. Honestly, I don't think you can say it's 1-to-1 no matter what. If anyone says, oh yeah, L equals Saturn and Jupiter equals this, you can use that. You can like argue that there's similarities and there's a lot of commonality, like especially with L and Saturn all day long. But you'll never be able to make a map of like this person equals this person. It's just, you can't do it. There's always going to be, for example, like Jupiter being king of the gods, storm god, stuff like that. He has all these traits that you would see with Baal. But you can also see Jupiter kind of being like an L in another, and like you can go both ways almost. It's hard to it's like when we were talking about the 12 constellation thing. Can the 12 tribes line up with the 12 constellations thing? You can do it. You can make a 1-to-1 drawing if you want to, but it'll never it's not like it's like completely clear. So honestly, I personally think Baal is close to Jupiter. They're both storm gods. They both throw lightning bolts. They both succeed. Like, for example, Jupiter succeeds Saturn. Baal succeeds El. I think there's a lot of commonality between those two. But you can also argue that Baal is a lot like something like Dionysus or something. You could say that. There's some people who say that.
So I tend to agree with both points that you made, that, it's not one to one. It's kind of like in the same way that, we aren't, like, we might be in the image of our parents, but we aren't 100% of their DNA. And so it's like it's a combination of all these different gods and like different motifs, archetypes, but it doesn't fit perfectly. That being said, there is some really interesting stuff, namely that the daughter of, well, Baal has three daughters with, I think it's a knot, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that their daughters are named, and I tend to, well, I'll talk about what sorry, I get ahead of myself. So their daughters are Artse or Artse, which is from the root of Aretz. And so some possibilities of what her name means is like earthy, or like basically like Little Earth, or even possibly connected with the concept of like the underworld, with Aretz being like the earth, but also like beneath the earth. So you have Artsy or Artse, you have Pidre, which comes from the root like Padar, which means like to fatten or to like to swell. So maybe like to blossom or to bloom. Um, and then you have Tale, which is from the root tal, which means dew or dew, so it means dewy.
Yeah.
But so basically, if you combine the name, we know for sure that Artsy, her story is probably connected to, or possibly even where the story of Persephone derives from. She's abducted by Horon, one of the, I forget if he's a brother or just a relative of Baal, but he abducts Artsy and takes her to the underworld, and you have like more or less the same story with some differences.
Sure.
But yes, so basically Horon or Hades abducts the daughter of Baal, Jupiter, and so like it's very very similar. Like,
Yeah,
so
that's you can definitely point. That's definitely a good case right there. Now, I want to get back to that exact topic right there in a minute. I just want to get through some of these super chats before they get old, before they get like, before people like leave or something. So, you know what I mean? Jason Sobek just joined. Dude, thank you. I appreciate your support. I really appreciate that. By the way, I just want to let everyone know that Jason and I have some videos coming out for both of our channels. Mostly his first, I believe. They'll have Dr. Sledge and Dr. Litwa talking about the Hermetic text, which is going to be insane. So be on the lookout for that. And then contextual religion with the 4.99 super chat. Thank you for that so much. Really appreciate that. Bro, I'm reading Ovid right now. This couldn't have come at a better time. I hope you're reading Ovid's Metamorphoses, because that's one of my favorite texts of all time. I have that sitting right over here, actually. This is the version. Actually, I got this version from Oxford, but I have an older version, and they're not the same. Oxford, I'm not sure why they did this, but there's a passage in the text. I think it's called the Death of Orpheus. Is that the name of the text? Death of Orpheus. But anyways, when Orpheus gets killed, there's some stuff in there that's not in this. That's in the other one. I don't know why they took it out, but it's the case. So that's interesting that different translations say different things. But Ovid is just one of the greatest. Ovid's one of the greatest. Thank you for that. And then there's one more, I think, and then we'll get back to what you were saying. And I do want to read that text too. Graham Pong. Thank you, Graham Pong, for the super chat. Ugaritic Daniel and the biblical Daniel related? I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
So I need to look more into it, but I mean, like etymologically, so Donnell would be like, that'd be like
Yeah, I
the
don't think.
the like the what? Well, just like etymologically though, it'd be like the judge god, or like or like God is judge, whereas Daniel is God is my judge. So one is the possibility of actually being an epithet of El, whereas Daniel is actually,
Yeah. Language wise, of course. Yeah,
yeah.
that's definitely a good point. Etymologically, of course they're related, because it's both from the Semitic language. So yeah, they both mean God is judge. God is my judge. But I don't think there's any connection to like who Daniel is compared to the Danel By the way, the Danel is the name of the epic, right? Pretty sure. The
Well,
Danel epic. I think that's what it's called. Judging the cause. I'm looking it up right now. The corpus tablets is often referred to as the epic of Akkad. Danel was depicted as judging the cause of the widow, adjudicating to the case of the fatherless. So yeah, it's interesting. There's a guy who's judging. His name's Danel, and then later on, in like the 1,000, maybe 2,000 years later, you get Daniel, who writes this prophetic apocalyptic text. You know what I mean?
so this is really interesting because so I looked this up. So 3 verses in the book of Ezekiel 14:14, 14:20, and 28:3 refer to Daniel, which according to the Masoretic text should be read as Daniel. This notwithstanding parallels and contrasts with Daniel without the I of the book of Ezekiel placed between Noah and Job and invoked as the very example of righteous judgment first pointed out by Rene Dussault in 1930. I need to look into this, but basically it seems like there might be a reference to the book of Daniel in Ezekiel, and then maybe it's like later it gets kind of pulled on, even if it's just in the most basic motifs, in order to explain why there's this reference earlier in Ezekiel that's like later being written in the Hellenistic era to explain, I mean, maybe they knew about this text before it got lost.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's a
So
famous text. It is. It's a famous text from in the Semitic world. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they knew about it. So yeah, that's a good point right there, and definitely a really good question. By the way, like I wasn't even thinking about that until he asked. Like that's interesting right there. John Geyer. Thank you for the super chat, John. Really appreciate seeing you in the chat. Always good to see you in the chat. Even Yahweh wasn't thought of the same everywhere. We was worshipped in the Ani. Ane?
ancient Near East.
Ancient Near East. Oh, my bad.
Also,
that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah, like for instance, in on Elephantine, the Jews living there worshipped him as married to Anat, whereas up in Canaan, they thought he was married to Asherah. And then obviously later on, both were seen as heretical, and then the idea gets kind of dusted away. But like it was definitely a thing, and arguably most Israelites, if not all, worship them as married at some point, regardless of who he was married to.
You know what this highlights, though? By pointing this out, this highlights that we can definitively tell that this Yahweh tradition isn't new or from like Jerusalem, for example. It's going back to the Canaanites before Israel. You know what I mean? You can obviously, it's like when you look at these different traditions, you can almost tell without a doubt that this Yahweh character goes back way farther than we think. And he's part of this pantheon, like we're talking about, which brings me to this next thing I want to do real quick before we even do anything else. I want to read this text because this text is amazing. It highlights the pantheon that we're talking about. It highlights the roles of these gods. It's really short. I'm not going to be here reading this for long, but you can also read along with me because I had the text that I could show you. This is what it looks like. It's a Akkadian, Ugaritic, cuneiform tablet, and it's called The Lovely Gods. And this is what it starts off as. Let me invite the lovely gods, indeed the beautiful ones, sons of. And by the way, when you see those dots, usually it means the text is like destroyed or something. Those given offerings on high, in the desert, on the summits, to their heads, and eat of every food and drink of every vintage wine. Peace, O king, peace, O queen, O enterers and guards. Death, the ruler, sits. In his hand, a staff of bereavement. In his hand, a staff of widowhood. The pruner prunes him like a vine. The binder binds him like a vine. He is felled to the terrace like a vine. 7 times it is recited over the dais. Was I read that right? I can't see it. Over the dais, yeah. And 7 times, and he enters, and the enterers respond. And the field is the field of El. Whoops. And the field of Asherah and Rame. On the fire 7 times, the boys with a good voice, coriander and milk, mint and curd. On the basin 7 times, incense. Rame goes hunting. She is girded with a lovely might. And the names of the enterers. The divine homes are 8, 7 times. Lapis lazuli, red crimson are the singers. Let me invite the lovely gods, ravenous pair, a day old boys who nurse the nipples of Asherah's breast. Sun braids their branches and grapes. Peace, O enterers and guards, who process with lovely sacrifice. Let me invite the lovely gods, ravenous pair, a day old boys who nurse the nipples of Asherah's breast. Sun braids their branches and grapes. Peace, O enters and guards, who process with lovely sacrifice. The field that is of El, the field of Asherah and Rame, to the seashore, and he marched to the deep shore, to the shore of the deep. El, the 2 servers, servers on the top of the pot. The lovely, see her, she is low. See her, she is high. See her, she declares, Father, Father, and see her, she declares, Mother, Mother. El's hand lengthens like the sea. El's hand like the flood. El's hand lengthens like the sea. El's hand like the flood. El takes the 2 servers at the top of the pot. He sets them in the house. As for El, his staff drooped. As for El, his love shaft sank. He shot heavenward. He shot a bird in the heavens. He plucked it, set it on the coals. El enticed 2 women. Now, if the 2 women declare, Oh man, man, your staff droops, your love staff sinks. Like a bird, you are roasting on the fire, burning on the coals. Then the 2 women will be wives of El. Wives of El, his forever. But if the 2 women declare, Oh Father, Father, your staff droops, your staff sinks. Look, a bird, you're roasting on the fire, burning on the coals. Then the 2 women will be daughters of El, his forever. I think I just read that part. As he kissed, there was conception.
Yeah, I don't think you did.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's like a repeating. Okay, I see. Look, a bird, you're roasting on the fire. So the 2 women become wives of El, his forever. He bent down and kissed their lips, sweet as pomegranates. As he kissed, there was a conception. As he embraced, there was a passion. The 2 crouched and gave birth to dawn and dusk. So now we see a little theogony going on here.
This is Shachar and Shalem.
Yep, that's what that exactly. That's what it would say. Shahar, yeah. Word was brought to El. El's 2 wives have given birth. What have they born? A new born pair, dawn and dusk. Make an offering to Lady Sun and to the stationary stars. He bent down, kissed their lips. Their lips were so sweet. As he kissed, there was conception. As he embraced, there was passion. He sat, counted to 5, for the assembly sings. The 2 crouched and gave birth to the lovely gods, day-old devourers, 1-day-old boys who suck the nipple of the breast. Word was brought to El. El's 2 wives have given birth. What have they born? Twin lovely gods, day-old devourers, 1-day-old boys who suck the nipple of the breast. So this is kind of like a song. They're probably singing this because you can tell how it repeats itself. Anyways, they set a lip to earth, a lip to the heavens. They entered their mouths, the birds of the heavens and the fish in the sea. As they move, bite upon bite, and they stuffed on both their right and left. As they bite upon bite, they staffed on both of their right and left into their mouths, but they were not satisfied. O wives, I have espoused, sons I have fathered, make an offering in the holy desert. The sojourn around rocks and brush for 7 years complete, 8 cycles duration. The lovely gods roamed around the open country. They hunted out the edge of the desert. The 2 approached the guard of the sown, and the 2 declared the guard of the sown, O guard, guard, open up. And he himself opened a breach for them, and the 2 entered. If there is food, give it so that we may eat. This is the last one. If there is wine, give it so we may drink. And the guard of the sown answered them, There is wine for whoever enters. He himself approached. He served a measure of his wine, and his companion filled it with wine. Now this like sewn imagery reminds me of Saturn a lot. Like
Oh, interesting.
L is so much like Saturn. It's so much. And right here, when you hear death, the ruler sits. When I found out that the oldest version of Dionysus, like when you read like Walter Burkett, like those people who do a lot of work on the ancient Greek religion, the farther back you go, Dionysus becomes basically he becomes basically one and the same as Hades. There are people who think that Hades and Dionysus are the same god. There are some who say that, like Diodorus of Sicily points that out. Actually, he says some people think Hades is Dionysus, and one of the names for Dionysus was Pater Liber, and he was like the ruler of the underworld. So when I think of that, death, the ruler sits like a vine. You know what I mean? I'm thinking like, I wonder if this is like the roots of like some like Bacchic stuff going
Mm.
on.
I, I could also see. Oh wait, can you keep it up?
Yeah, yeah.
I could also see how it could be read that like death the ruler. Wait, where is it that the death the ruler sits. That's being compared like a vine. Maybe that like death creeps, that you can see it coming, you can prune it, but like a vine, a grapevine, there's this idea that even though it appears to be gone, it's still there.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and this one, what's her what the god the two goddesses, Asherah and what's the other one?
That's what I was wondering. It seems like it's saying the sun, maybe.
Well, no, there was the one, she was a huntress. I'm trying to find Rame goes hunting. She is
What?
girded with lovely might. Now,
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking because there's actually a text, and it's also reflected in the text that I read in my video that Sanko Niathan talks about, where Venus and Artemis are basically like sisters. So if you hear I'm sorry, did I say Venus? I'm thinking Athena. And a lot of people connect Athena with Anat. And then if you then connect a knot with Asherah, which a lot of people also do, you're like, maybe this is like some sort of like, different version of these two goddesses sisters. You know what I mean?
Well, so the only so rachme, it's from the root racham, which means to like be merciful. So I mean that see in that like it almost seems like that's an epithet, because I know it's also like harachaman is used as a epithet for God like in Judaism, but you also have I think something similar in Ugaritic, or yeah, like Rahma. But what's interesting here is that so yeah, I mean this is interesting. I'm definitely going to have to look more into the whole Rahme thing, but it does kind of remind me of the two wives of Jacob, Rachel and Leah, and how they're like,
Oh shit. Yeah.
and like
But
it.
that's such a good point, dude. Because Jacob in a lot of ways reminds me of what you can say is like a euhemerized version of Saturn. He's the father of the 12 tribes, right? Just like you have with Saturn has 12 titans that he bears. 12 titans, 12 sons of Jacob. Jacob and this is where it gets confusing because Jacob's not the first person to do circumcision in the Phoenician text. The first person to do the circumcision is El. So and so an El offers up his son Yehud to Aranos. So that's where it gets confusing. So it's like, is Abraham? Would you compare Abraham to El? Yeah, but then you can also say Jacob sort of like El too. Like it gets kind of confusing. Then you could what is like which one is it? Or is it both?
So I think it's not just both. I think you have these motifs deliberately like dehumanized, or essentially like humanized in so many forms, so as to make it seem that these stories about the like essentially I view it as it was probably written polemically, like as not to, or maybe not even to say that these things didn't happen, but it's kind of like by taking these stories that are associated with gods and by associating them with humans, and then basically having the only god in this text, that you're essentially having all the gods from the other, from the Ugaritic and from, Canaanite stories, and you're making them humans, all in service to the one, which ironically is kind of similar to what it was, except in the case of, Ugarit and Canaan, they were gods serving the one. Instead, this case is the chosen of God, or the children of God, serving the one.
Yeah, and it's obvious that with these ancient pagan theogonies, you have some sort of sky father like Aranos, and then he gets succeeded by Saturn, and then Saturn gets succeeded by Jupiter, and then Jupiter, gives birth to the divine child. In the case of Dionysica by Nonos, it's Zagreus. You know what I mean? Who becomes the twice born Dionysus. So a lot of people have pointed out that Joseph in the Old Testament is just like Osiris, where he goes down into the dungeon and then rises back up, basically. There's a lot of comparisons between Joseph and Osiris. Now, if you take that, but if you take the fact that several, like probably at least 10 ancient writers, Herodotus I know does this, Diodorus I know does this, I think there's others too, who point out that Osiris basically is the Egyptian version of Dionysus. So now keep that in mind, right? You have Dionysus at the end. So, okay, Aranos, Saturn, Jupiter, and then Dionysus. All right. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Right? Now, I think what's happening in the Old Testament is, it's like I said, it's not a one-for-one thing. It's not like you completely can transfer over all these traits to, like, Abraham is exactly like Aranos, even though Aranos is like the father of all the gods. He's the heavenly father, but Abraham, father of nations, right? Jacob, and then you have Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. So I think there's a lot. The succession of these four have a lot to do with the succession of these gods. What do you think?
Oh wow, that's interesting. Because so okay, this is really interesting. So within like Jewish mystic understanding, each of the different patriarchs has like a different trait associated with them. So Abraham was chesed, he was kindness, which is also kind of ironic because he was going to sacrifice his only son. Well, not only one of his sons, and then later he sends off the other son because Sarah tells him, yeah, you have to send them off. So not really that kind to his own family, which is actually the source of part of the reason why Isaac was associated with Gevurah, with like strength or severity, that he was kind of bitter because of this. And so he was very harsh and very, gruff. And basically, then his children were basically that Jacob was a kind of a mixture between his father and his grandfather, like the spirituality of his grandfather, but the strength and like the fortitude of his father. And so he basically represents like beauty, or kind of like the balance between them. But like in that, it definitely reminds me of how you have like Uranos, which is I mean, not necessarily Uranos within the like directly deity sense, but more so just as a concept. Like the heavens is associated with wisdom, or wisdom, and like with well, and that's also the thing, because it's kind of, it's not a one for one even with this. So it's like wisdom and kindness, but but then you have his son Kronos, who or El or whoever, who is seen as kind of cruel, and so that matches a bit more with Isaac. And then you have that the son of them, who is kind of the balance between, who is in the image of his father and his grandfather, but kind of like corrects that which they did wrong, which even I would dispute, because I mean Jacob literally steals the birthright from Esau, and so it's the morality is a bit iffy,
And
but
it's like Jupiter stealing stealing the kingship from Saturn,
true.
Now I know it's not the same as doing it to your brother, but still, I think there's still something going on there. And I think the most obvious of them all is where you get this final chosen of the 12, which I would say would be like you compare that to Dionysus, so Osiris, with Joseph.
Yeah, or in the case of like Canaan, Eshmun.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, before I read the super chat out, there is something that blew my mind recently. I did a video a year ago about this connection, but I did a video similar to this video, like doing connections and stuff. And I pointed out that I wonder if Varuna and Aranos have a linguistic connection. I couldn't find. I was looking around for different scholars and trying to find. I couldn't find it at the time, but I just recently did find someone who did write about this, and it's from a scholar named George Dumetzel, French philologist and linguist, religious studies scholar. Perfect person, perfect source for this, because he's trained in linguistics, and he's a religious scholar, and he's a philologist. And he says that Waranos, with a W, or Werunos, is a reconstructed Proto-Indo-European king of the gods, nocturnal sky, benevolent counterpart of Dios or Dios, possible cognates with Greek Aranos and Vedic Varuna. The Proto-Indo-European root word Waru, listen to this, means to encompass over. So he's basically, Waranos is the personified deity of the firmament itself, the sky, which would be Aranos and Varuna. So if anyone doesn't know, there's a Vedic god called Varuna. It looks like this. And what's so mind-blowing about Varuna is one of the oldest sky gods. It goes back all the way to the Rig Veda, one of the most ancient of ancient gods. And in the text, the Bhagavad Gita. Wait, is it the Bhagavad Gita? No, it's the Mahabharata. Sorry. Bhagavad Gita is inside the Mahabharata. In the text called the Mahabharata, there's a passage where Krishna prays. Who does Krishna pray to? Krishna prays to Varuna, which would be like Saturn offering to Aranos. Like, who does Saturn pray to? Saturn's a god. Does he pray to himself? No, Saturn offers up to Aranos. Well, in the same context, Indra, who is basically Zeus or Krishna, prays to Varuna, prays to heaven. Heaven personified, the deity of the heavens, Varuna. So that there's a lot going on with these succession gods, and I think there's a common source for all this stuff. Probably somewhere in like ancient Phrygia, somewhere around there, like ancient Turkey, Persia, Caspian region, somewhere like that's probably where all these go back to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I we were talking about this before, but there's probably a connection with the Scythians, because like they were really the ones who were spreading this culture throughout the world, and like wherever they went, you can see like especially the idea of like the goddess, specifically like Asherah or Kybele, or all these different forms. There's definitely a connection between them and the Scythians. And the Scythians are also connected to cannabis, and probably the reason why that might be relevant is because whenever you're dealing with an item of trade, especially something that alters the mind, you're going to create the opportunity for new narratives to be created, especially mythological ones. I mean, you can see it especially with just the stories that people have around crops that we grow for food, but especially ones that we use for medicine. And I think that probably some of the best like explanations of that is within like indigenous cultures. And I was actually talking with someone else about, there's this one reference in the Talmud to this one village called the Boys Village, because apparently everyone within that village well, there's two understandings. One was that everyone all the women would first give birth to boys and then to girls, and another that all the women in the town would like only give birth to boys. And like there's probably like hidden within these stories are probably references to plants or to different
Sure.
techniques that were used, like for instance the sota, or the bitter water that was used as an abortive fashion in the Old Testament to induce to induce abortions if women were suspected of being unfaithful to their husbands. So like anyone who says that the Bible is pro-life, it isn't.
Yeah, you have the only text that we have that regards abortion is someone giving abortion, and nobody's saying there's anything wrong with it. You don't have God coming down and saying, "No, no, no, don't do that." It's actually like, "Oh, by the way, if you need to get rid of something, if you're in a jam and you need something, take this drug right here, and it'll like it's pro-abortion, whatever." That's another topic for another day. But anyways, Ramblin' Willie, thank you for the super chat. Abel means father, Baal, Abba El. Yeah, Father God, Abel. Yeah.
Well, so this is one of the reasons why it's so important that like especially when people are talking about etymology, that they look in the original language. So it's not actually Abel, it's Hevel. And so Hevel, like with a ha. And so
I see what you're talking about. No.
So what it actually means breath, but sometimes it's actually translated as vanity. And so it's the idea that there's like the breath that like that we breathe, but this is the idea of like the breath, like it's in your lungs and then it's out, like you breathe and it's what keeps you alive. But Hevel, it's the idea that it's like here today, gone tomorrow, that it's almost like the moisture, like it's the stuff that's in your lungs, it doesn't stay there. And so with that, it's connected to Abel, but or Hevel, and basically that he was named that. Like it's kind of one of those things where the narrative, he was named that, either he was named that or his naming was a prophecy, or like a foreshadowing that he wasn't going to be around for long.
Yeah, I think when you go back far enough, like let's be real here. We're talking Cain and Abel. These aren't historical anymore. When we go back, if we're going beyond Abraham, come on. Let's just be honest about it. Is it possible that it could be historical? Yeah, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it's probably more likely that when we're going like early Genesis chapter 6, 7, we're probably dealing with theology, philosophy, and maybe I'm not going to say fable, but like it's kind of is, But I will say this: a lot of people talk about, David didn't exist or Moses didn't exist, and it's like now we're talking Moses, David. I mean, anything after Abraham, it's a lot more possible. For Moses, I don't know, because we don't have a lot of evidence. Is it possible that Moses is based off somebody in history that we just don't have like a lot of information on? Of course it's possible. I know, but with David, people say, that David doesn't exist. Well, there's a lot of scholars who think David actually did exist. So I like to be fair and keep it open to like different possibilities. But yeah.
So Anonymous, just before we get on to this next one. So Anonymous has been like, we're on the same wavelength. So before, when we're reading the, like the lover gods or whatever, like Anonymous was saying, this is like Song of Songs. I'm like, that's exactly what I was thinking. It seems like Song of Songs was derived from that, maybe, or inspired. But then with this, Anonymous said that the sacrifices of Cain and Abel can be seen as a lament for the pre-agricultural revolution era. I definitely think there's something to that, but the vein that I was going into it with was the whole, with Ishtar and Tammuz, and like the courting of the god or the goddess, and where they're offering their sacrifices. You have the shepherd and you have the farmer, and in this case, the one who's chosen is the shepherd, whereas in the other one, actually was it the shepherd or the point is the shepherd is more connected to to Yahweh, whereas the farmer is more connected to Asherah, because this concept of like the grains and the stuff that's used for incense versus the the fat and the meat of the sacrifice. And so there's this dichotomy, and then the one that's chosen in this version is the shepherd, and then not only does it martyr the shepherd, but the farmer is put in the in the frame of being the bad guy, because it's like, okay, I'm going to go kill the shepherd, which it's kind of like, it doesn't really, like, the farmer, if anything, would probably be more peaceful.
Yeah,
But
well, that's why the early Christian Gnostic group called the Cainites, not Canaanites, the Cainites. They thought they were a lot of these early Christians who were just reading the Old Testament for the first time. They were just getting a copy of this. They went to whatever, they're living in Egypt or something, and they were getting a hold of this new religion, Christianity, and then finding out, well, oh, okay, what else does the Old Testament say? Oh, this Cain and Abel thing. Cain was a What do you mean? Cain was a tiller of the land, and he offered up, vegetable cakes as an offering. That's a good thing, because these are people who are coming out of the Neo-Pythagorean tradition, the Middle Platonists of the time period. They were more likely to be vegetarians, and they probably saw this text and was like, no, they got this story wrong. Cain was the good guy, and not only that, this Yahweh God, he's the bad God. And Jesus is the son of the good God. So a lot of these early Christians had two gods. I think that I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the Valentinians were like that. But the Cainites definitely one of the sects. They were one of the sects that had two gods: an evil god and a light god of light, basically. And then Jesus wasn't the son of the evil god; he was the son of. People get this mixed up. They're like, "Wait a minute, the Gnostics don't make any sense, because they're saying that the God of the Old Testament is evil, but they believe in Jesus, who's the son of that God." I don't get it. No, they're actually saying there's two gods. Jesus is the son of the God of light, and he's against this other God, who is Yaldabaoth, or Yahweh. So I just wanted to point that out there, how you have this Cainite. Look up, I did a video with Litwa called Cainites, Cainites. Look them up. Dude, it's amazing. But that's kind of read this super chat. Contextual religion. Thank you for the super chat. What do you make of the connection between Yerushalayim, King Solomon, Sol Shalom, Absalom, with the god of dusk, Shalem? This is something I haven't heard. I haven't looked into deeply. And I'm just going to throw that right over to you, because you're the Hebrew guy, not me.
So, so Jerusalem, there's a few etymologies that are proposed. So one of them is from the root ear. It starts with ear, and the ayin gets dropped, so you just have a yud and a resh. So you have yir, and then or yiru, the city of Shalem or Shalayim, which could be the city of peace or the city of Shalem. So like the city of peace or the city of dusk. And it's possible, because it was originally a Jebusite fortress. And so, this wouldn't even contradict with the biblical narrative, because, they were pagans. And so it could be that the name stuck and that it gets reinterpreted as city of peace, or possibly also as, what's the other? So there's Jerusalem, and then there's also, Yerusha, which means inheritance, like from Yarash, which is, it's interestingly also possibly connected to the same root as like Asherah, through the connotation of like marriage and like family connections of basically Ashar, Yashar, and then in this case it would be Yarash, which is just a reversal of Yashar. But so it could be Yerusha, like Yerusha Shalem, the inheritance of peace, or inheritance of Shalem. So those are some possible ones. But then, so Avshalom means my father is peace, or, so, in this context, I think that it's probably, there might be a connection, but I'd have to say it's definitely more connected to the concept of peace. But the thing is, peace is connected with Shalem, because so Shalem is also from the root like Shilem, which means to fulfill. It's also connected with like, I think, actually I'm not going to say that because I'm not sure, but basically, so it means to fulfill, and with peace, it's like fulfilling a conflict, like, bringing it to a close or to a finish. And so, so in that, I mean, there might be some connection, especially because there might be some connection of like the full. Actually, that's what I was going to say, the full moon, but I'm not sure about that.
What does
Because
Solomon mean again? I think you just said it, but I wasn't. I
no,
missed.
so that was Avshalom, means my father is peace, and he was the son.
No, I'm saying
Oh
what is.
wow!
I was saying what does Solomon mean again? I think you said it, but I forgot what you
Oh
said.
no. So I didn't say yet, but
Oh, you didn't. Okay.
so Solomon is Shlomo. So it basically means like, I think it means he is peace, like Shalomo. Yeah, he is peace, I think. So it literally, so it's saying he is peace, and then his son is Avshalom. My father is peace.
Now you get this. You like some of the Freemason. What's his name? What's that famous Freemason from the early 20th century that everyone? Manly Hall. You get Manly Hall, and you get what's her Madame Blavatsky. And I'm not gonna lie, I like reading those people because they're really interesting stuff. They do a lot of digging like we do. But you'll once in a while you'll come across like some like pseudo scholarly, like Krishna and Christ are cognates. That's I'm not kidding. That's Manly Hall said that. Manly Hall also tried to make the claim that Solomon is like sun god, soul. That I don't think that's true, right? That's pretty bunk. But I'm going to ask you, what do you think about that?
So I actually want to say that. So I have to admit, like, they did some good work. They also did some bad work, but
Yeah.
more than anything, like, so I don't know specifically that much about Manly P. Hall, but in terms of Blavatsky, and I think this would actually be something interesting to talk about sometime, because it definitely like covers modern Gnosticism. But Madame Blavatsky, like, honestly, she might, like, not directly, but she helped to seed the ideology that led to the rise of the Nazi Party.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
like, it's just, honestly, I didn't even know this until I started doing research for a paper on modern anti-Semitism. But the whole idea that like some of her beliefs about like it's interesting how she'll talk about, paganism as, there's nothing wrong with it, but then when it comes to, that the Jews are secretly pagans, there's something wrong with that, and they're like, I don't know, it's interesting how.
Look at
Yeah.
this is Manly P. Hall and George Steinmetz. It's called The Lost Word and Its Hidden Meaning. It's a Freemason book. Now look at this. I don't know if you can see this bottom page. Can you see it?
Yeah.
All right, read that last paragraph.
Let's see. Last, Osiris is not so much expected to assure salvation as to take charge of the human soul after death, to sit in judgment upon it, and if it be found worthy, to allow it to pass on to the realm of the blessed. Krishna and Jesus are saviors in a different sense of the word. In both cases, those who believe upon them shall be saved. Also, it is said of each after their physical death that they shall return. One interested in the etymology may see a connection between the Sanskrit name Krishna, the Greek Christos, and the English. I mean, to literally say that.
Look, read the next one.
English Christ, each in turn derived from the former, and all meaning the
The
anointed.
anointed. He's basically trying to say that Krishna means the anointed. It's not true. And the reason why I brought that up is because in another text he makes the claim that Solomon is like a reference to the sun, because soul means sun.
Oh, that must have been what that one person who was saying Sol Shalom.
Yeah. That's why I wanted to. I did all that theatrics for a reason, because like there's a lot of misinformation out there. And look, I don't hate Manly P. Hall, because people who watch my channel probably love Manly P. Hall. I actually love Manly P. Hall. I love reading his stuff because it's so fascinating and so like fun, and he really was into all this stuff like I am. But there's a lot, you got to be careful when you read those texts. Like, you have to double check what they're saying. You have to check what they're saying. But what do you think about that? Soul and Solomon being connected.
I mean, I'd have to look more into it, but just from like the thing is that, I mean, maybe what I'd suspect is maybe there's some sort of, like, when it's being Europeanized, the name, that there's some connection there. But the thing that I do think is interesting, another thing that Anonymous said, Anonymous pointed out that David was not peaceful. And so the name is in reference to Solomon. But something that's interesting about that is that David wasn't actually allowed to build the temple. God, Yahweh wouldn't allow him to build the temple because he had too much blood on his hands. I mean, he literally had the blood of more than just this, but specifically he had the blood of 200 Philistine foreskins on his hands. So like that's a lot of blood, maybe not the hands that should build the temple. And so that's why it was given to Solomon. And interestingly enough, there's like historical records of David. I mean, whether like him as a person or just as a dynasty, but there are no historical records of Solomon. And one of the reasons one of the reasons why he might be real, but we don't find any records, is because his reign was said to be one where there was no wars in Israel. And it tends to be that in those times, the records that survive are those that are records of wars.
Dude, I'm not kidding when I say this. I was in a conversation with some people on another channel. It was a panel, and we're talking about Christianity. We're talking about the Old Testament and like this. I'm not kidding. One of the people who was he was like pro Christianity brings up, well, Solomon. We know all about Solomon, and I'm like, well, what do you mean we know all about Solomon? And he goes, well, what do you mean? He had so many kingdoms. He had hundreds of wives. How can we not know? Like he's assuming, and a lot. I used to do this too. It's not just him that did this. I used to read the text when I was a Christian, read the Old Testament and the New Testament, and because the claims in there are so, like strong. The claims are so strong that you assume that they're real because somebody would, if this wasn't true, somebody would have said something by now. The truth is, people are saying stuff. You just got to look for it. Like you're not going to hear it in church. Nobody in church is going to tell you that there's no evidence for Solomon having 100 kingdoms. You know what I mean? So I thought that was interesting how he came off that way. What do you mean? Of course we know all about Solomon. I go, well, what do you mean we know? I go, you better give me some information here because I'm missing something. Please fill me in on all this information about Solomon that we know. And he said, because the text says that he had all these kingdoms. And I'm just like, yeah, the text says that, but we don't have any archaeology to back that up. We don't have any, there's no like inscriptions. There's no, like for David, you have an inscription that has his name on it. You have one of those, which is not a lot, but still, at least you have that. For Solomon, you don't even have that. So I don't know, like for him to have 1,000 wives and hundreds of kingdoms, you would think somewhere in Egypt or somewhere in Syria or somewhere in Persia or one of these supposed kingdoms of his would have some remaining artifacts from this period, but there isn't anything like that. So you're left to just conclude that a lot of these stories are not true. But not only that, there probably was some city. He probably held a city state. If he I would probably say lean towards Solomon existing, me personally, but I would say he probably held the city state. Jerusalem.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Like something that is, and it's funny because I don't know if you've ever seen this. It's basically a conspiracy theory. There's like where people are like, oh, the Zionists are trying to establish greater Israel or whatever. And have you ever heard that conspiracy theory?
Yeah, I hear it all the time.
So the funny thing is like, I mean, yeah, you have like a fringe group within every population that would like to conquer an entire region, but like that's not something that is even like within the goal of even the most ardent Zionists or extremist Zionists, because there are Zionists who aren't extremists. But the point being is that like the idea that that like Solomon had this great kingdom is actually used by a lot of people to like justify, and I think you can even see this from, I want to say like other nationalities within the Levant, where they'll almost like graft onto this idea of like not like a greater Israel, but like just a greater was it like a greater Near East, or that I think in some ways probably a lot of the story of Solomon is actually derived from Sargon.
Yeah.
Or like one of these near like emperors of the entire region that ruled over the entire that entire world essentially.
Yeah, that's a good point. No Anonymous is bringing me back to the topic at hand because we veered out very far. Very good point. Let's get into this. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think you brought something to show that compares these, or not, or if you didn't, that's fine. I could be wrong. Did you not? If not, we can just talk about it. But I do want to compare the Canaanite myths, not only just Canaanite, but Greek Hittite, Sumerian, Theogonies, we call them, where it's like in the beginning it was chaos, and then all of a sudden out of chaos leaps out desire, or in some texts it might be, you have a sky god comes out, and it's like you can see and throughout these theogonies, whether it be Hesiod or the Sanchoniathon myth, you see the commonalities along these. There's a lot of, for some reason, a lot of them have in the beginning. You have Eros, which is love, with night. For some reason, those two are like the first two of the primordial gods that come out, night and love. Like that's a very strange, specific two deities to come out first out of anything. It could be earth and sun, or it could be moon and sun, or it could be the sky and the earth. But for some reason, which is actually a common one, Gaia and Aranos is very common too. But like Hesiod has two versions, and one of them it's Gaia and Aranos, and the other one it's love and night, Nyx. So when you compare it to Genesis, and I had some scholars tell me about this too, you have the Sumerian myths, Sumerian creation myths, where there's two waters, Apsu and Tiamat. They represent the water of life and the salt water of the whatever, like the water of death, I guess you would say. But in the Genesis myth, just like that, Genesis starts off in the beginning. Actually, let's pull up Genesis 1 real quick.
Here, I can do that.
Okay.
Also, just before we continue, there was that one thing about Daniel. I found the reference, and I mean, it's also the same page that I'm going to pull up Genesis on. So
okay.
I'm sharing it. So, so here, O mortal, if a land were to sin against me and committed trespass, and I stretched out my hand against it and broke its staff of bread and sent famine against it and cut off man and beast from it, even if these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, but here, if you read the Hebrew, it like the Masoretic text has it like they try and make it say Daniel,
right,
but it literally is just Daniel.
Right, that's interesting.
So yeah, there's definitely something interesting there. And then the other thing that I just want to show here was this graph was made by Sam Aronow. He has a really good YouTube channel. But
yeah, I love Sam Aronow. Yeah, I'm a Patreon of his. Go ahead.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so I screen capped this for a presentation I was doing on Ashura, the menorah, and the tree of life. But yeah, here you see El Elyon, which is even, this might be a bit simplified because El Elyon is an El, but you do have an understanding that El Elyon is like a title of El when he assumes the role of his father. But then here you have like the sun that it was talking about, Lady Sun, Shapash, that the male version is Shamash. And then here you have Atar, which is connected to, I think, Astarte.
Hey, look, then you see Siddiq with Eshmun too.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Where's that?
On the right.
Oh, yeah. So it's Siddiq, and I guess it's saying Nikal, that give birth to Eshmun. And then here you have Moloch and Ishat. Ishat literally meaning like fire woman, or it's apparently.
Now, would you think that Asherah is sort of like the earth? She's kind of like a Gaia. I mean, think about it. Tiller of the land, farm goddess, goddess of the earth, right?
No.
Or is she more like a Demeter?
She's more like Demeter, and she kind of like takes on the role of, she's the goddess of the earth, but she isn't the earth in the same way that the god of the heavens isn't.
But that's like Demeter. Demeter is not the same as Gaia, but she is the goddess of like grain and tillering of the land and that earthy stuff.
Definitely, yeah. And so this is what I was talking about before. So Pidre, Tale, and Arce, that they're connected to like Persephone, and then Horon, which is Hades, and then Anat and Baal are their parents. And then the father, apparently there's even some dispute whether the father of Baal was El or whether it was Dagon.
Interesting. Now, can you pull up Genesis? So, because I want to look at this for a second, because when we look at Genesis, and I have the Theogony as well, I should pull that up as well. It's somewhere in my saved screenshots. Let's see. Did you pull it up yet?
Yeah.
All right. Let me.
Genesis 1.
Yeah. Now we're going to see if I got my Theogony out here or not. Is this it? No, okay, maybe I can just pull it up. But let's read this first. Okay, so when God creates heaven and earth, is this that's Genesis 1:1?
Yeah.
So it's not in the beginning.
So
I thought Bereshit means in the beginning.
so it's complicated. So it's
Okay.
not in the beginning. So it's Bereshit bara
Yeah.
Elohim. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
possibly it's like the beginning of God's creation,
I see what you're saying.
or
All right.
in a beginning God created
Yeah.
the heavens and the earth. But even here, this is interesting because it also is probably like it's connected to the Islamic understanding as well. How bara can mean it doesn't just mean to create, to shape or form, but it also can mean to cut down, to cut out, or like to separate.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea that in the beginning, the heavens and the earth, they were, they were one. They were like, mushed together, and the space between them didn't yet exist.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because the Theogony. There's two of them though. I'm trying to find the one where here it is. Okay, from the beginning. All right. Let me share my screen in 1 second. All right. So let's read this out for a second. First of all, you have God creates heaven and earth. Now, in the Septuagint, it's Ouranos and Gaia, heaven and earth, Ouranos and Gaia, which is also the names of two different gods, right? All right. And then earth being formed in the void without darkness of the surface, the deep, surface of the deep, and a wind from God. Go down a little bit, please.
Sorry, one second.
Just keep going. Go back to right there. Go. All right. So the darkness of the deep and a wind, God sweeping over the water. Now, is that water? Isn't it the waters and some texts or no?
So that's just also how
I see the eam at the end. Let's click on that word. Click on that word.
So there is a form where
that's the waters. It's.
I mean, so this is part of the thing, though. So Mayim, there isn't really like a singular form. Like there's May, but that means the waters of.
Right, but the text, the word Hamaim could be the waters.
I mean, so like technically yes, but the reason why I would push back is because there's a specific term that that's used to refer to like multiple waters. Given it's probably a different context, but there's this.
Yeah, but I thought you can use the word Ma'im for waters.
Oh, okay.
The reason why I'm making a big deal out of it is because when we go back to the Sumerian creation myths, there is the two waters, Apsu and Tiamat. Now keep going down a little bit. Because there's the deep. Go to the word deep. Or no, it's right there. The word deep.
Right. So yeah,
click on that word deep. Tehom. That word Tehom is cognate with the god Tiamat. So we already have multiple gods: Gaia, Ouranos, Tiamat. Do you see what I'm getting at? So if this text is trickling down from the ancient world, right? This Genesis text is as old as the Jews claim it is. Then the way they would have to provide that evidence, because they're not wrong. This really is an ancient text. They're not wrong about that. What it is though, it's a more refined version for a monotheistic God. Does that make sense? Because when we go to, I'm going to share my screen now. When we go to Hesiod or the Sumerian creation myths, we see from the beginning, one of them came first, chaos came into being, then Gaia, Earth, the unshakable seat of all the immortals who peaks snowy Olympus, and dark Tartaros, which I guess you can that could be like Tiamat, the deep, right? And then Eros. Okay, so in this text, so from one angle, from Genesis, on one front, you have the Theogonies, where you have Gaia and Ouranos, and on another front, you have the Sumerians. You have the two waters, Apsu and Tiamat. When you put them together, you can see how Genesis gets formed, right?
So yeah, so one of the things, so it said chaos is the first thing. So in Hebrew, that would be tohu, But then later, from that same root, Tohu, you have Tehom, but this isn't chaos, this is like the depths. And so it's interesting because it's like they're connected linguistically, but they're two different things.
I see what you're saying. Now, yeah. So when I look at Genesis, what I'm looking at, what I think I'm seeing is a refined theogony. I'm not seeing a new creation that somebody just made up in, what is it, fifth, sixth century BCE when Genesis gets written down, something like that. Whatever. I don't think this person's just, so there's two ways to look at it. This is the most ancient story ever written by Moses. No. Or somebody just made it up and said it was written by Moses in this 5th, 6th century. I don't think that's true either. What I think is happening is this really is an ancient text, but it's a refined polemic of the ancient theogonies, like Hesiod versus Sumerian myths versus, the Sanchoniathans, which is a theogony as well. What it is Genesis is like one of those, but for the Hebrews. And it's refined for a monotheistic purpose. So all those gods, Gaia, Earth, Ouranos, heaven, the two water gods, Apsu and Tiamat, the deep, Tehom, or Erebus, all of those gods just get turned into something that God is doing. So God's separating the waters. God makes heaven and earth. God creates light. All of that stuff becomes a phenomena that God is doing in Genesis. So they start off as gods in these ancient texts, and they become God's actions in the Genesis story.
And
right?
that's actually a perfect connection. So one of the things that we've been talking about a bit, between us, like through text, is the connection between what was it? Between like proverbs and like a lot of Hellenistic concepts, especially like the idea that wisdom. So the direct translation, it tends to be that like in the God created me wisdom as the first of his works, like from like like in a time long gone, and then it talks about I. It says I was fashioned from the source of the earth, but literally, if you look at the linguistics, you could argue that it's connected to like the idea of Athena being born from the head of Zeus, because it's was it I was acquired. So this is wisdom being acquired by God, by Yahweh, possibly by consuming the wisdom, because it's not a creation, it's an acquiring of wisdom. And then it says, I was poured out merosh mikedem, from the head, from the was it from the head or from the top, from the east or from the source. So like from the head of the source, I was poured out. And like just this understanding of wisdom as water, and it's I don't know, like there's definitely something going on there, especially because the first of his works, the first of the first of Zeus's children was Athena, and the first of God's creations is wisdom before he even creates the world.
Yeah, and that's some of the Gnostic stuff gets into that, where they say that wisdom, Sophia, was really the true God and creator of the world, and that there was some sort of mix up happening, and Yaldabaoth, who's he's the evil god, becomes sort of like, he gets like a memory implanted in his head where he thinks he made Adam and Eve, but really it's just he's mistaken. Really, it's Sophia, and it's just when I look at these Gnostic texts, right? What I'm seeing is I'm seeing people from the Greek world who are probably coming out of a Neo-Pythagorean tradition or some sort of Middle Platonist tradition, and they're reinterpreting the Old Testament in their own likeness. And they're saying, nah, that can't be the good guy. That's the bad guy. And they just change a few details here and there, and then boom, you have a whole new theology. You have a whole new religion, basically.
the great irony though is that I actually think that the demiurge isn't Yaldabaoth or it's not Yahweh.
Yeah.
The demiurge is Sophia, and that's like the great irony because like and like
The Neoplatonists, Proclus points this out, that Athena, who is wisdom, she's like Sophia incarnate. She's also comes out of the mind of Zeus. Zeus's intellect comes out of his own head. She has equal. This is according to Proclus. He's known as the Neoplatonic successor. He's like the face of Neoplatonism in his time period. He says that Athena, being wisdom, has equal demiurgic powers to Zeus, meaning she's not less than Zeus. She's equal to Zeus. Like she has equal amount of demiurgic powers to Zeus. You can translate that over to Judaism with Gnostic Judaism or Christianity Judaism. But you know what I'm getting at. You can transfer that over to Sophia and the demiurge easily. It's the same thing.
Well, and so the reason I say this though is because there's one part in Proverbs, I forget exactly where it is, but ve'ihye etz lo amon, and I was with him. Well, it translates with him, but literally beside him, at his side, Amon, as a Amon. And some translations they'll be like, oh, it's a nursling, or it's a nanny, or it's what was it, like a caretaker. But really the word Amon, it's the same root as like omanut, which is art, or like artwork. It is something that you do with your hands, that like you fashion. And so like literally saying that I was at his side as a fashioner, or as an architect, or as a creator, or not like so. And this is the thing, in this understanding, the source of creation is God, but the creator is actually wisdom. And so there's something really interesting there, because like you even see this in the way that the rabbis interpret the creation, that that God, that Hashem created the world like through the basically through the Shekhinah, through the like he creates the world, but then in actually creating the world from inside itself, with the whole idea of like and the wind, the ruach ha-Elohim was over the al pnei hamayim, over the face of the waters. That's connected to the idea that part of creation is actually a creation from within the creation, and God can't do that because he's outside the creation. So that's why he needs this demiurge to go in, except the demiurge isn't male in this case, it's actually female.
Yeah.
Or rather feminine.
No, and Sobek brings up a good point, because when you get into these later Platonist texts, where you get this text called the Chaldean Oracles. This is a translation by Thomas Taylor. It's a good translation, where they're basically playing with this Pythagorean idea of numbers. And first you have a monad, then you have a dyad, which is 2, then the dyad splits and becomes a triad, and then all numbers spring from that. So what they do is they take those numbers and they deify them or personify them. And so you have I'm going to read this real quick. You have, hold on one second, let me find it. The one, who is basically Jupiter, right? Then the number, oh, my camera is turning off. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna have to close this out soon, but I'm just gonna read this out. Hecate, right? You have the father Saturn perfected all things and delivered them to the second intellect, Jupiter, which the nations call, the men call the first. Then Hecate, or Rhea, the vivic foundation of souls, is comprehended under 2 intellects. Immense nature is suspended about the shoulders of the goddess. The center of Hecate is carried in the middle of the fathers. In the left hand inwards parts of Hecate, the center of the intellectual gods is the fountain of virtue, which wholly abides within and does not emit its virginal nature. So she's basically like Athena here. Her hairs appear similar to rays of light, ending in a sharp point. Rhea is the foundation, or Hecate, and the river of the blessed intellectual gods, for first receiving the powers of all things in her ineffable bosom. She pours running generation into everything. Jupiter, the artificer of the universe, the duad, sits with this god Jupiter and glitters with intellectual sections. So you see, you have the Saturn, the father, and then you have Jupiter, basically son of Saturn, and then you have the divine intellect. I guess you can call her the Logos or Sophia, wisdom, and that is this goddess. So in the Chaldeans they call it Hecate, but the Greek Platonists call it Athena.
Interesting. So, like, and I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, how like they don't really match up one to one, even within the same tradition.
Yeah.
Are you able to share your screen?
Oh, there we go.
Okay, awesome.
All right, cool. So yeah, man, that was I don't know what happened. I got to get a new battery, I think, or something. My battery's not working too good. Anyways, yeah, that's interesting though, right?
So, shoot, there was something that someone. Oh yeah, some interesting comments I saw. Let's see.
Is there any more super chats or no?
What?
I didn't see any super chats. Did you?
No. So Tzimtzum said, yes, the primordial Torah, the 231 gates of letter combinations from the Malchut of Ein Sof, which is like, so the Malchut is like the bottom, or the like, essentially it's the fruit of the tree of life. And then the Ein Sof is like it's kind of like Elyon, the god above gods.
Yeah, that's the Chaldeans would say, or the Platonists would say, that's the monad, the one, the father. The father is the monad. He's the beginning of all. He's the demiurge, and then the father's son is the dyad, who's like the artificer, the savior role, and then you have wisdom, Sophia. Is that what you were saying, or are you saying something else?
Yeah. It. Sorry, my mind's kind of all over the place. Because I was also looking at the other comments.
Thank you, not anonymous for that super chat.
Anonymous.
Appreciate that.
And then,
yeah. So I would say that Elion is kind of like a monad, you know?
Yeah. So, and I think this is kind of what's interesting. Like, you look at it. So Elyon is, basically you could view it as nowadays, the god that Jews worship is Elyon, but it's all the different manifestations of Elyon, basically just kind of bound together. So that's why you have one god, but you have many different names, because you basically have this understanding that all these different gods are just, except for like you have instances where there's like Baal and Ashtoreth where they're shamed, but truthfully, I think even within the original context, they were just understood as emanations of the monad or the Elyon. And in that, like, if you think about it, say you have say you have a man, and that man has a family. His children are not only an emanation of himself, but of his wife. Or I mean, like, I'm using a heteronormative example because of for the sake of using reproduction, because like that they're in the likeness, like in the physical likeness of both you and your spouse, or not even spouse inherently, but basically when you look at it that way, we emanate through our offspring and through our work. Like that which we leave behind in the world is how we emanate in a way. Because what does emanation really mean? It just means to kind of to shine forth. Like you have a source, and then something comes out from that and continues on. And what is that if not a family? And there's like these ideas like that Jacob is dead but he yet lives, or something. And it's this idea that Jacob as a person died, but Jacob as a nation is still alive. And so like that's kind of where you get this idea of Am Yisrael Chai, that the nation of Israel still lives. And then also with David Melech Yisrael Chai Chai Vekayam, David, king of Israel, he is alive and standing / existent. So it's like it's saying even though he's dead, he's still alive through his progeny, through the line of the Messiah.
Wow, that's interesting. Jub Nomo just dropped a $20 super chat. Thank you, Jub. J Dub. Sorry, J Dub. J Dub Nomo. Read that wrong. Thank you for that. A little something for your new camera battery. I actually do need that. Actually, that's probably going to be bought this week for sure. Thank you for that. Thanks for the education. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate having people watching and engaging and being here. Just so back at you. Thank you for watching and talking and leaving comments and stuff. It's cool. Can't you?
Ooh, I have I just thought of so some people are bringing up the connection with the Yazidis and like basically how I think it's that they worship Melek
Oh,
Taus.
we didn't even get in. And
Oh,
I'm not changing the subject yet, but we didn't even get into the whole Yahweh Tzavahot and Jove Sabazios. But go ahead, finish your thought. What were you saying about that?
Some people are bringing up the connection between what was it, Melek Taus, and like basically the concept of like how there's a connection between that and Gnosticism. I think they have like 7 angels, and they're like, but their understanding of God is derived from. I don't know enough to speak on it, but one thing that I thought was interesting that like it was a little like one of those weird things with grammar or like linguistics, but so basically, so the name for a peacock, it I might be slightly so it's hodu. So the word for the word for peacock is hodu, and that's hodu is also it's the same root as like Yehuda, but also so like it basically means to be humble or to be thankful. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that I mean this is just kind of an aside, but that so hodu is also, or like hodu indit, or like basically peacock was a way that that European colonists used to refer to the turkey. And so the turkey is basically referred to as an American or an Indian peacock. And with that, there's just an interesting thing that, people eat turkey on Thanksgiving. It's called hodu. Hodu is also the name of India, but the thing that's relevant is that, like, that on Thanksgiving, you're grateful, like, lehodot, for freedom or for whatever, but that you're eating turkey, hodu, you're lehodot lehodu, you're thankful for turkey. I mean, it's a stupid little linguistic thing that I found, but yeah, there definitely is something about what is it, the peacock? Because oh right, this is what I was thinking about before. So I was actually discussing this on the Myth and Lore Discord server, which if you could actually include that in the description, that would also be really cool, because some of the discussions that we've been having there, it's like just mind blowing. But one thing that I'm going to give a shout out to Mateus, or Pierrot. He pointed out, because he wanted me to look through some ketubot, or some like Jewish marriage contracts, because we're trying to come up with like a intro sequence for my channel. And so one of the ones we found happened to show, like, a lot of them happen to have peacocks, and like there's a lot of symbols that are connected with Asherah. And I do have to wonder, maybe there is a connection between the peacock and Asherah, because there is a connection between the peacock and Hera and Asherah are very similar.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then that might have some connection to the idea of like Melek Taus being represented as a peacock, but I don't really know enough about that to speak.
Wow. By the way, I'm gonna try reading this real quick just to practice my Hebrew. Israel, Lee, which means because
Lee for me.
Lee. Oh, for me. Rosh, Ish, Rala, Shirim.
So so Lee Rosh for me ahead. Yesh Ralo. There is, and then Ralo. I don't know what Ralo is. Lo is no, but I don't know what Ralo is. And then Sharim is gates.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm stumped, but it's interesting. I just wanted to try it. I didn't even know what it said, and I just pulled it up. Just messing around. Oh, real quick, let me throw this up there. So this is I know it's Wikipedia, But Wikipedia is not that bad. The reason why I'm pulling this up, I want to show something real quick, because this is, even though I'm looking at Wikipedia, I've actually checked into this. This is a true story. In the year 139 BCE, and there's a text from Valerius Maximus. They have it on I think it's on a stone actually, or no, it's a book actually. Okay, never mind. It says it right here. The first Jews who settled in Rome were expelled in the year 139 BCE, along with Chaldean astrologers, by Cornelius Hispalis under a law which prescribed the propagation of corrupting the cult of Jupiter Sabazios, according to the epitome of a lost book of Valerius Maximus. Gnaeus Cornelius Hispalis, praetor peregrinus, in the year of the consulate of Marcus Populus Lanus and Lucius Calpurnius, ordered the astrologers by an edict to leave Rome and Italy within 10 days, since by a fallacious interpretation of the stars, they protrude fickle and silly minds. Wow. Thereby making profit out of their lies. The same praetor compelled the Jews who attempted to infect the Roman custom with the cult of Jupiter Sabazios to return to their homes. By this, it is conjectured. Now, this is from a different source now. This is not from that source. This is from, let's see. Oh, this is from Plutarch. This is from Plutarch, guys. But you should still check this. You see, what I'm saying, make sure you double check this. I might not be wrong. By this, it is conjectured that the Romans identified the Jewish. No, yeah, I have read this before. I'm sorry. I thought I was reading something else. This is exactly what I was getting at. Yahweh Sabaoth, Sabbath of the host, as Jove Sabazios. Yeah, Plutarch does say this. This mistaken connection of Sabazios and Sabaoth was often been repeated. In a similar vein, Plutarch maintained that the Jews worshipped Dionysus and that the day of Sabbath was a festival of Sabazios. By the way, the reason why Plutarch is saying that is because Sabazios was identified with Dionysus. They're both gods of ivy. Plutarch also discusses the identification of the Jewish god with the Egyptian Typhon, who's Set, an identification which later he rejects. However, the monotheistic Hypsisterians worship the Most High under this name, which may have been a form of the Jewish god. What do you think of that? Isn't that just wild, dude?
It sounds like they were realizing that there was a connection there, but that they were like that it was being like they're polemicizing the fact that the connection is being drawn.
Yeah. Yeah, and I pointed it out in my video about the Hypsisterians. Do we have like good evidence for this being true? No. I pointed that out. But it's interesting that Plutarch would even bring that up, and the name does sound similar. So it does sound like there's a linguistic connection. Could be a coincidence though. I've seen way bigger coincidences with linguistics. Like there's another god from like Phrygia it sounds like Hermes, but it's not. You would think it's like another version of Hermes, but it's not. It's nothing to do with Hermes at all. So those things do happen where you'll have a deity pop up somewhere, will have a similar name as another deity, and you're like, oh, it's got to be the same god. And it's just not. It does happen, but that doesn't mean, I don't know. What I'm saying is we don't know for sure. We can't really say for sure. And
Wow.
Jason makes a good point. Plutarch is probably getting that from Menetheo and Apion. Probably, yeah, because Plutarch is writing a little whiles after them, so that makes a lot of sense.
So I just realized something that's like on it. Wait, shoot, who is it? Dang it, I just had it. Oh right. So yeah, here. So it was about the super chat. So
let me read it real quick. Thank you, Contextual Religion, for the $20 super chat. You are amazing. And let's see I think the Jews believe the same stories from Greek mythology. I see parallels between the angels and the Greek gods. That's a good point. They get away with calling it monotheism by lowering the divine nature of angels and only worship Jove. Such a good point. It really, no, because think about it. Like let's be technical here. Is an angel a deity? Yes, an angel's not an animal. It's not a human. They're not like, they're spiritual. They're not like humans. So yeah, And by even the Vedic religion has one Brahma, has Brahman is the highest of all gods. Brahman has different forms, but under Brahman is all these lesser gods. They're like angels and demons, basically. So there is no pure monotheistic religion that says there's only one God. And if you did find that, it's basically deism at that point.
So there's definitely something. Wait, shoot, what was it? Oh yeah, that I would maybe push back a little bit. I wouldn't say that they are gods. I'd say that they were gods. Because shoot, basically, like they, at least within Jewish tradition, as well as I think you might have this within Islamic. I'm not sure about Christian, but basically this idea that angels don't really have any will of their own, like that they're servants of God, but like the thing that separates humans from them is that we have a free will. I mean, really, how free that is up to debate. But this kind of reminds me. I'm going to share my screen. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah, like I feel like the context we read it in is. Oh shoot! Are you?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
All right. Can you share the screen?
Yeah.
So, Abraham's debating with God, saying, well, technically, actually, I forget if it's with the angels or with God, but God through the angels, and he's basically saying, what if there's 10 people? Will you not destroy the 10? So, but then the two messengers arrived in Sodom in the evening, as Lot. Well, and messengers, literally angels. The two angels arrived in Sodom in the evening. As Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom, when Lot saw them, he rose to greet them, and bowing low with his face to the ground, he's bowing down to them. I mean, implicitly because they're servants of God, but there might be something more to it. He said, "Please, my lords, Adoni, or not Adonai, please, my lords." Which is interesting because the word that's used, like Adonai, to refer to God, it's not Adoni, it's Adonai, my lords, grammatically. But turn aside to your servant's house to spend the night and bathe your feet. Then you may be on your way early. But they said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." But he urged them strongly, so they turned him away and entered his house. He prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. They had not yet lain down when the town council and militia of Sodom, insignificant and influential alike, the whole assembly without exception, gathered around the house. And then they shouted to Lot and said to him, "Where are the ones who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may be intimate with them." So the thing that I'm thinking is, so we're supposed to understand that this town was just extremely wicked, which, I mean, that first of all, the reason that they were wicked, it was because they were inhospitable to strangers. They basically raped anyone who would come to town. That it's not because of the modern context of sodomy, nothing to do with that. But the thing that I find interesting is maybe there's something more to it. Maybe the angels are being essentially seen as gods, and you do have this idea of like gods within the ancient Near East having relations with men, and they're like, for instance, they're seen as so beautiful that the men of the town just want to sleep with them.
Right.
And
I get that, but what I'm saying is, if we're just thinking technically here, like if you had a religion where there's only one deity above humans who has power, and there's no angels, no demons, no lesser god, no nothing, it's just this one God. Give me an example of that. I don't think there is one. Even people like to say, "Oh, what about Zoroastrianism?" Zoroastrianism has tons of gods. You have Ahriman, you have Mithra, you have the goddess Anahita. There's tons of gods in Zoroastrianism, and so then that brings us to, is Judaism purely monotheistic? Well, you have Satan, you have Michael, you have, you know what I mean? You have, there's different, and so I don't know but I get what they mean by monotheistic, as in you're only worshiping one God. That I agree with. Like, you're not worshiping Michael the angel, but like there's other, I don't know if you want to call them deities, but there are other powers. Like, they're not human powers. If that makes sense. That's the only thing I would say, but I get why I can see why people would say it's monotheistic in the sense you're only worshiping the one God. So Zoroastrian, you only worship one God. You don't worship other gods. So I get that.
that's one of the and someone in chat said it, Mr. Crichton, henotheism, where you have the acknowledgement of multiple gods, but the worship of one, or like the essentially the exaltation of one, but the acknowledgement of many. So like the idea that there are like basically that God is the only God and everything else is just idols or like some sort of demons, like evil spirits, but the only God, not like the only God you should worship, but the only God is God. That idea is post-exile.
Yeah. Vesper, thank you for the super chat, Vesper. What do you think of Jesus represented as Helios and Mary Magdalene as Selena in the 6th century monastery of Lady Mary Mosaic, Bet Cheyenne, Israel? It's a good question. What do you think? I'll pull up the is it Jesus though? That's Helios?
I mean,
I don't think they say that it's Jesus though. Is it? I might be wrong though.
well,
Let's pull it up. Okay, 6th century monastery of Lady Mary Mosaic.
oh, I think I could understand the context. So imagine an eclipse, like the dark period of the night, or essentially December, and then you have the moon in front of the sun. Then the sun comes out of the moon. The moon gives birth to the sun. I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to force it to make sense.
Wait, why would the moon give? I mean, he's talking
Well,
about Mary Magdalene, not Mary the mother.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry. I'm like, I am.
What do you,
I mean,
think?
so I wonder when it's from, but the context that it could be in is
Century monastery of Lady Mary Mosaic.
Because there is this understanding, especially like within Jewish mysticism, that like there's like a masculine and a feminine part of God. It's like I think it's like
I found it. I know what they're talking about now. So they're talking about this mosaic right here. This is actually a very famous one. Hold on, let me pull it up for you. But I don't. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think they say this is Jesus though. This one. I don't think they say. I think it's just Helios and Selena. I don't think I don't think they're claiming. Now, Vesper, if you're in the chat, let me know. Is there someone that says that they're claiming this is Jesus and Mary? Or are you just asking if we think that's possible? Because it's possible, but I would like to see, somebody who made this say, like, if it's 6th century, it's late enough in the game that we should have something signifying like, oh, they wanted this to be Jesus and Mary. You know what I mean? And also, was Mary Magdalene ever identified as being the moon? Is that a thing? Maybe, maybe not. Not that I know of, though.
So the context that could be in is basically that there's this idea that like it's in given this is from the Zohar, but I have a feeling they're pulling on older stuff. But this concept that like that Baal is Hama, or like the husband is the son, and then was it Vit and Asherah is Levona, is the Nekevai, is the like female, is the moon. So there's this connection between the moon and the sun, the like masculine and the feminine, and Baal and Asherah.
By the way, you can see the Greek in this one. Those are months. Those are 12 months of the year. I see on the right, Octobrios, Novembro. Yeah, those are months. So this is just a 12 months sun and moon. Now, I've not heard anyone ever say this is Jesus and Mary. If you could show me that, I'm interested to hear it. I've never heard that yet. I've never seen somebody say, "Oh, when this mosaic was made, it was made for Jesus and Mary." But I'm open to hear. I could be wrong. Vesper, let me know what you got over there. Let me know what you're sitting on. What kind of sources you got. But it is a beautiful mosaic. You have to admit, it is a beautiful mosaic.
Ooh, that's interesting. Who is it? Neptune's Lagoon said he's a redhead, and that is an interesting point because
well, it's the sun. It's the sun, of course. The sun's. You think the sun's going to have dark hair? It's the sun.
Well, but it could be blonde.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But so the thing that's significant about that is who else has red hair? King David. And actually, I wonder.
Yeah, I don't know if this is Hebrew though. Is it?
Well, no. No, it's not. The point is that there's this motif of the sun having red hair, or like this like, and David is also like compared to the sun, and there's
Sure.
this especially like within Kabbalistic understanding, he's like represented by the sun. But on top of that, you also have this understanding that was it like Huad Moni, he was like ruddy, and it could be like red hair or like red, like ruddy cheeks. But the other thing is that was it David Yafe Naim Huroe by Shoshanim, or actually wait, I might be mixing two things up. But it's David Yafe Naim. David was like beautiful on the eyes, or David had beautiful eyes. I don't know how you would best translate that, but
Right.
there's this understanding of like the beauty of the sun. And there's even this one thing I found a reference to in looking at the etymology in the Brown's Drivers Briggs. Apparently, there's some speculation that there might have been an ancient Near Eastern sun god named Dodo, which is from the same root as David, and that like there might be some connection there. But maybe, ooh, this would be interesting. What if Beit David is actually Beit Dod, and then
Well,
it's
that's how they say it in Arabic. In the Arabic, it's Daoud, because the va becomes an o, an You know how in Semitic the vav can be a vowel. There's in the Arabic tongue, people say David is Daoud. Actually, behind me, I have the 1001 Nights, Arabian Nights translation, and that's how they have it. Daoud, they actually spell it in English Daod for David. So it's like you can see how that got back. It gets like translated back into English that way.
And actually, in Elder Scrolls, the founder of the Redguard Kingdom is named Diwad or Divad Hunding, and like it's like you see how it gets.
What about Dewa for DS Potter? Dewa. That's like
Oh yeah.
That's another way to say it. That's an Proto-Indo-European. That's not even Semitic. It's European though. But that would be kind of weird if you figured that up to find a connection there.
So Simtsum said the moon represents the Shekhinah, which is like the feminine part of God, and Knesset Israel, which is like the assembly of Israel, and the sun to Zeir Anpin, which I forget exactly what that translates to, but I'm sure he'll fill us in.
Well, yeah, I want to say before I go to the next super chat, Vesper, if you can find something that someone like pointing out that is supposed to be Jesus and Mary Magdalene, I really love to see that. I really would love to see that. That'd be very interesting. But as far as I know, I'm no expert in this. I'm just some guy. As far as I know, I don't think that's a thing. But like I said, if you find something, let me know. I would love to see that. I would definitely talk about it too if that was a thing. Meat Juice, thank you for this super chat. Meat Juice, interesting name by the way. Meat Juice. It's a contradiction to think angels don't have free will, because Satan and others chose to rebel.
Did they though? Did they really?
I think so. Right? Wouldn't that make God, like, if angels didn't have free will and Satan was supposed to do that, doesn't that make God like a complete psychopath? Like, I'm going to create this deity. His name's going to be Satan, and I'm going to make him become like, do all this crazy stuff. And he's going to be like, why would he do that?
Well, you can look at the book of Job. Like, he's like, given it in this context, it's not understood that they don't have any, independent thought or will of their own, but more so that they don't act on their free will. And the idea with, like, at the end of the day, I've yet to actually find really any text, at least within the Hebrew Bible, that refers to, like.
Well, what you're saying right now, Philo talks about if you read Philo, he talks about the 7 planets as like basically they're like subordinate beings of God. They can't leave their orbits. They only can be in their orbits, and they don't leave their orbits. And then he talks about how his logos, which is his messenger, basically the word of God, that he comes out about. He talks to Moses. He talks to Jacob. He talks to all these prophets. That particular being is very subordinate to God, and it only repeats what God wants him to say. So in that sense, you do have a case there. But then this person has a good point. Like, what about Satan? What about Samael And what about all the angels from Enoch that fell down to earth and just decided they want to go ham and make a bunch of giant babies?
Well, but see, even with that, like, I mean, I don't know specifically about that, but like when it comes to understanding of the snake in the garden, I mean, I think maybe this is because of how it's been edited to remove, Asherah and the other gods, like basically just referring to them all in general as Elohim. But basically, how you have this idea that God knows everything that's going to happen. He omniscient, omnipotent, and yet he does. So, like you can explain away, like, where are you, Adam? He's not asking because he doesn't know, but he's calling out to Adam so that he'll answer him. I mean, like, I could see an argument for that, but when it comes to what is it, the snake in the garden? I mean, why does God allow the snake in the garden? He can't be all good if he's allowing the snake to take advantage of his creation. In which case, I truly think that because they didn't have knowledge beforehand, they didn't know what he meant by "if you eat of the tree, you shall surely die." They didn't know what death was. They were essentially children. And so for God to put that in front of them, he literally says, don't eat of the thing that will give you the knowledge to know that you shouldn't eat of it. It's a paradox. And so in that, I don't think that it's saying that God is evil. I almost see it as like you're setting forward like one of those games of mousetrap where you have the first thing and it's like it's just inevitable that it's going to play out a certain way. But part of it, I mean, in Christian Christian doctrine actually kind of talks about this, that he who created, or he who is without sin created sin so that we could be righteous in him. And there's this idea that if you don't know right from wrong, and you don't have the capability of choosing, you aren't either right or wrong. And so in that, like, did Adam and Eve actually sin when they ate of the fruit, or did they gain the ability to sin?
It's a weird concept, actually, because I mean that's where Christianity polemicizes Judaism to begin with. That's what Paul always talks about. People who are in the law are in bondage because they can't just do things because it's in their heart to do it. Like they have to do it because the law tells them to do it. And that's like one of the things Christianity does to separate itself from Judaism is it gets into this whole concept of you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't eat shellfish, but like really, what does it matter? Like what matters is what's in your heart and how you are as a person, and if you believe in God and all this. Like it doesn't really matter about these dinky laws, and that brings it, which it all comes back to that one thing. It's like sin. What is it? Like how do we deal with it? You know what I mean?
Also, another thing that's really interesting that I recently discovered this, I forget if I told you about this, but so the dyes that we're producing, actually, if you have the one where it talks about like the crimson, scarlet, and lapis singers, if you don't still have that pulled up, it's fine. But it, like, that's also going off of this concept of like the blue, the red, and the purple. And one of the interesting things is it was necessary that you had these dyes that were produced, the argamon, the purple, the shani, the scarlet, and the techelet, the blue, and they all come from non-kosher sources, non-kosher animals, and these are things that need to be in the temple. So you have this idea that even with like there's still this, like, there's this purity within like impurity. And I think there's something really beautiful about that because it also kind of goes on the idea that the king of Israel, from whom the Messiah is supposed to come from, not only was he, not only was he probably bisexual because he had a relationship with Jonathan as well as his wife Michal, he also was the grandson of a Moabite, and Moabites are one of the tribes that the Israelites aren't supposed to intermarry with because Ammon and Moab were descended from Lot and his two daughters. So basically, they're born of incest, and so even there's this idea that even from what's seen as impure people or impurity, good can still arise. And so, like, it's also interesting because, like, in this you have the, like, it's an acceptance. It's literally saying that the leader of literally the Messiah will come from a line of, of Moabites and, and someone who is in a relationship with a man. And that completely goes against every fundamental Christian, and maybe not Jewish, because like traditional Judaism like understands that. But like just in general, it's very like it goes a lot against our perceptions of the Bible.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's the one thing that theologians struggle with over the centuries. Like you see this with like you read Boethius and you get into like the later Christian theologians, and this is the one thing that they like wrestle with, and up all the way up through, you get going through like different eras of Renaissance and Enlightenment until finally people just realize that humans are not like we're complex. Like we're not meant to be like this thing where we have to have a certain way of living, a lifestyle for set for one person, like male and female do this and you do this and you do this and I think people realize over time it's like every human being is complex, and there's not everything is not just black and white. There's gray areas, and we have to do that. We have to deal with everyone on an individual basis. It was almost like for like a good, I don't know, say a good millennia, good 1,000 years, that people lived like fake lives. Like, okay, I'm gonna get married and I'm gonna go to church and I'm gonna have a wife. We're gonna have a child and I'm gonna work for this company. I'm gonna be in the military and go to war for my country. And like there was like this like weird fake charade happening for a long time. People couldn't really be who they really wanted to be. They had to just play a role, especially when we talk about like medieval times, like during the, I don't know, whatever. It doesn't matter what time period. But like when you look at certain times in Western history, where people are like, the king's job is this, the duke of this place does this, and within these kingdoms, you have everyone has their role, and you're born into whatever you get. If you're born as a slave, sorry. If you're born as a whatever, like whatever you're born into, you just got to play that role for the rest of your life, and that's it. And now we're at a time where finally people can be themselves and sort of like go beyond what they're born into. Like we're seeing more movement from classes. People can be born. It's not perfect yet. Like still, people who are born poor probably most likely will stay that way. That's how it is. The rich will get richer. The poor will get poor. But it's getting better now because people are more progressive. We have more progressive tendencies now. So now we're seeing a lot more likelihood of somebody who's born poor can become rich through getting an education, through doing like becoming who they are supposed to be, not just who they're assigned to be. You know what I mean? I think that's one of the big things that humans as a collective is getting towards. Does that make sense, or is that complete? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, yeah. It's like you're basically nailed down. You're fixed in your position, and it wasn't just like the cultures around you, like even within your own culture. But it's like now that those constraints aren't there, people can seek out essentially whatever they want. It kind of reminds me of the there's this one part. It's there's certain things that if you do, it said that you'll like in the Bible it says if you do these things you are to be cut off from your people. And like one of those things is like going around and anointing people, outside of the temple, or burning incense outside of the temple. And so I think probably within that context, it's like, what would it mean now to be cut off from your people? It's like, okay, you're excommunicated, but at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that, like because in ancient times, say that were to happen to a Jew, they basically wouldn't be able to survive, because if you can't exist as a Jew within the Jewish community, you can't exist as a Jew outside of the Jewish community. And I think you probably have some parallels within, other communities as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like I don't know. I'm just picking like a random.
You're muted, I think.
Am I muted? Really? You can't hear me now?
Maybe I am.
Oh, well, I was like, if you went into a random medieval kingdom in like the year, I don't know, 1410, and you just pick some random guy, they're wherever they are in their life is assigned to them based on who their parents are, like who their arranged marriage is probably going to be. Like mostly people were just like a marriage was like a thing that would happen to get you a better position. Like, oh, we found this girl and her parents want to marry her and her status is above ours. This is a huge jackpot. This will raise our family up to the next level. That's what life was for so long. And now we have this world where people can actually like free pick who they want to be and how they want their lives to end up in, what their destiny is. I think that's something that we need to fight. People should fight for, where you have people who are actually trying to actually go back to this sort of theocratic mindset. You see what I'm saying? Like you have that happening, especially here in America. People want to go back to the old old days, like where everything was all traditional, and you got married in the church, and you just did what the pastor said. Like that to me, that's what, and it's ironic because Christianity, if you really go deep into what it's trying to say, like what Paul's talking about, the law being bondage, those are really interesting points that you can point back at them for like that lifestyle. You know what I mean? So it's funny, and Nietzsche actually talks about this in one of his, I think it might be the Antichrist, where he actually says like Christianity did its job because it gave the people the spirit of always wanting to how does he I can't remember how he says this, but the spirit of like rebelling against like certain statutes, like the law, being under the law, for example, as being bondage. That mindset is what like slowly kicked in over time again, and then it was self-defeating after a while, because then the church became the law. You know what I mean? The church became the new Pharisees after a while, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's also also there's just some comments like someone said that but diaspora rabbinical Judaism hinges on the Jews being always persecuted, the plight of the semi-failed chosen people. That's not really true. Persecution is understood as being part of it, but it's like it's not inherent. It's the idea of being in exile and in galut, but it's not just like a physical exile outside of the land. It's an exile, like a spiritual exile, and it's connected to the fact that there isn't a temple. But even then, there were 5 things missing from the second temple that were in the first temple, and I tend to think those things were things that connected it much more, or like are the connection to that henotheistic or like world where there's an acknowledgement of multiple deities, and that for whatever reason it wasn't included in the second temple, and that was seen as being lacking.
Yeah. Now, I was gonna say we probably should wind it down soon, but I know, I think there was something else that we were gonna talk about, but I forgot what it was. But yeah, what else did you have for us?
Let me think. There was definitely something. Give me 1 second. Or actually, yeah. Here, pull up what I'm sharing.
Sure.
Just give me 1 second to find it. Sorry, 1 moment. Let's see. Do I have it? Shoot. Oh, right. It was. Can you pull up the slides that you had before? Like the first ones, just to see if there was any last thoughts I had from them. Try maybe the third one. Let's see. Maybe the next one. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So here it says, "Let me invite the lovely gods, indeed the beautiful ones, sons of." So, oh, okay, that's what it was here. Or I'll just read it off because that way we can see the or
This
uh
one?
Yeah, just keep that up there, and I'll find the equivalent in like Song of Songs. So let's see. Shoot, I just had it up. Song of Songs. It's, I think. Right. Let's see. I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. I've eaten my honeycomb. Wait here. Let me skip a bit further. Let's see. There's a part where it talks about. Okay, yeah. Okay, here. Return. So this is Song of Song 7. Return, O Shulamite. Return, that we may. Actually, here, let me just pull it up so that y'all can see. Let's see, so it's in Song of Songs. This is 7. Okay, so how lovely are your feet in sandals, O daughter of nobles. And then I think what you had pulled up had a reference to, like, children of gods or something. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a master's hand. Your breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Let's see. How fair you are, how beautiful, a love with all its. Okay, here. The head upon you is like crimson wool. So the hair's like crimson wool. The locks of your head are like purple. Like so here there's definitely like this wait. Crimson wool. What's the word it has for crimson wool? Carmel. This is interesting. So no, so this is the head upon you is like a carom or it's like a plantation or a orchard. Let's see. And your mouth is like choicest wine. Let it flow to my beloved as new wine, gliding over the lips of sleepers. I am my beloved, and his desire is for me. Come, my beloved, let us go into the open. Let us lodge among the henna shrubs. Was this Kefarim? Yeah, the henna shrubs. Let us go to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine is flowered, if its blossoms have opened, if the vineyards are in bloom. There I will give my love to you. The mandrakes yield their fragrance, as our doors are all choice fruits, both freshly picked and long stored. Have I kept my beloved for you? If only it could be as with a brother, as if you had nursed at my mother's breast, then I could kiss you when I met you in the street, and no one would despise me. Let's see. Furthermore, okay, here. Who is she that comes up from the desert, leaning upon her beloved? Under the apple tree I roused you. It was your mother. It was there your mother conceived you. There she who bore you conceived you. So now can you pull up the other one again?
Oh, I don't have those anymore. Those are gone now.
Okay.
This guy just lost them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think one of them was talking about that they were in the desert. Oh, and that's the other thing.
Yeah,
So
the desert. Yeah, it says about the desert gods.
it talks about them being in the desert, basically wandering for 7 years. I wonder if there's a connection between that and the 40 years in the desert that Moses and the Israelites wandered. Because, like think about it.
My only question for that would be, what would be the significance to make that? Like, is it like what would be the significance of borrowing that for the Exodus?
Well, it's connected to this idea of like purification. You go out into the desert to commune with, divinity. You're going away from the filth of the city.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so with 40 years, it was the 40 represents a generation. But then on top of that, you have this idea that, so what does the 7 represent? Well, like for instance, in a Jewish wedding, the groom walks around the bride 7 times. Like there's this connection between 7 and and divinity, especially within.
Oh yeah, 7 is the biggest number for the Pythagoreans. You have this idea where you would dip your head 7 times in the water. This is in the Apuleius's Golden Ass, where Apuleius is basically saying, to get baptized by, they don't use the word baptized, but to be purified by Isis, you would dip your head in the water 7 times. like the Pythagoreans would do with their number 7. That number 7 is definitely universal across the board.
Oh, sorry.
And then not only that, you have in Deuteronomy where it says if a priest sins, a priest has to slay a bull and then dip their hands, sprinkle the blood 7 times on the horns of the altar. So you get 7 sprinkles of blood, just like you have 7 dips of water. It's a purifying thing, like you said.
Also, I wanted to correct myself. Well, technically, Sim corrected me. It's the bride that walks around the groom.
Right. I got what you're saying. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some connect. Like, there's this idea that, like, midbar, the word for desert, is also connected to the word davar, which means word. And so, like, for instance, the Torah is davar Adonai, the word of the Lord, or the word of God. And so, but within this, it's not just like that which he speaks.
Wait, davor? You said davor?
Davar. And then also,
how do you spell it? How do you spell that?
Daled Vet Resh.
So I wonder if there's a connection between David and Devor with the cognate Dev.
No, it's spelled it's spelled differently.
Oh wait, but Daled Vav.
No, Daled Vet. Vet is just a different form of bet.
Oh, vet. I see what you're saying. It's okay, got you.
And then I mean, so then there's also Devir, which I think Devir is like the seat, or like, yeah, I think Devir is like the space in between the 2 cherubim, and it's like the holy seat. But like there's this concept like that Devir, it's like it describes something, but it's also, I think, in some I'm not 100% sure, but basically there's this concept that it's used to describe, but it's also like it can just be a thing. So it can be a word and a thing. Oh, but and then the other, I wonder if there's a connection with, I might need to look up how it's spelled, but Devora, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we could figure that. We can do something like, that could be a nice segue to talk about the next time we go live. We can try to get into some of this stuff. But yeah, we have been going for like 2.5 hours now, and I'm getting kind of hungry. So
yeah, take care.
You know how it is. But yeah, man. By the way, do you have any video? I gotta put your link in the description. Did I do that yet or no?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Let me pull up your channel before we go. Let me pull up your channel.
And then also, I also put in the private chat a link to the Discord if you could include that as well.
All right, yeah. Let me find your. It's Asherah's Corner.
Asherah's Orchard.
Asherah's Orchard. Sorry.
No problem.
And Asherah's Orchard. Where is it? Oh, Ariel. Oh, here we go. Got it. So let me share my screen real quick so I can show everybody that you have a channel and people should go subscribe for sure. 1 second. Go and subscribe to Asherah's Orchard, guys. He does this videos just like me. He gets into this deep stuff, esoteric stuff, and he speaks Hebrew, and he can speak and read Hebrew. So he's got a little bit of an advantage over some of us when he's reading this text. He can read it and speak it, and yeah, you guys should definitely check out his channel. Go and subscribe. Hit that bell like I got on, and that's it.
Thanks. Yeah.
And
then I was just going to say, and then the Discord server is where I've actually made a lot of like recent discoveries lately, just because the ideas that get bounced around there, it's really interesting, especially because like it's almost like kind of the conversations that happen in the comments, but it's like even after the streams are over, it's like you can still have the conversations.
Yeah, I'm gonna once I leave off of this, I'm gonna put both of those links in the description for people who watch this later, because that way they'll have a link.
All right, cool. Thanks so much.
And you have just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over